Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Your Health is Your Choice, right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I am your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Jeff Dawson. We're going to be talking about cancer today. You're not something that we like to talk about, but he's definitely had his experience with it. We're going to be talking about how he lost his fiancée to cancer, but also how he spent 25 years in the wonderful world of road construction, then had back surgery in 2010, which put him on the skids on that career. And then his body couldn't handle the vigors of 12 to 16 hours, so 6 or 7 days a week anymore. And as he convalesced, licking his wounds, he wondered what next. And not being out in the sun, getting baked or dodging traffic was going to be a hard act to follow. So we're going to be talking about an article in the Daily Morning News that caught his eye and about being a professional speaker. He thought that was interesting, and becoming mobile again, and took a seat in front of a black monitor and pondered what to write. And then what did he write? Well, that's what we're going to be finding out today. And we're just going to take this journey of love's true second chance and what did happen. So let's jump right into it, shall we, folks? And Jeff, back problems, losing your fiance to cancer, you've lost a couple of other people to cancer as well. You know, there are always these redirects that we get in life, these challenges that we have to face that put us in a different direction. And cancer is such a unfortunately common disease and a nasty disease, and we never know if somebody's going to recover from it or it's going to take them. But there's always a lesson to be learned from it, isn't there? Welcome to the show.
Yes, there are always lessons. I've lost my partner, my father, and then my fiance to different forms of cancer.
I have a family that's been riddled with
And
cancer, and it's
what,
not an easy journey at all.
no, it's not. But the one thing the first book I wrote was Why Did Everything Happen? After the intro, and I had the back surgery. And that covered my partner, my father, and Debbie, because I got a chance to look back and see, okay, why was I there?
Mm,
Well, there was a reason that my life, it wasn't the exact path I wanted my life to take, but if it would have gone another direction, I would not have been there to take care of these people. My partner, we worked together, obviously, but we still had a company. But with my father, I was able to be there for 7 months and take care of him. And with Debbie, it was kind of the same thing, only I'm working in Dallas. She lives 2.5 hours north of McAlester, Oklahoma. But I found out real quick that work is going to take a back seat
mm, mm.
because their well-being was much more important than earning money. I can help take care of these people.
Yes, yes. And
And
I
it's
mean,
not
you're lucky that you could, right? You're lucky that you
very
could.
much so. Yes, if I'd have been extremely successful, then I would have said, I don't have the time. I can't do this. You're just gonna have to hire a full-time caretaker. It's not for me. But since my life did travel the path it did, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Nothing. I
Hmm.
mean, 7 months with my dad. I mean, that was priceless. And the same thing with Debbie. It was just that's where you find out a lot about yourself and the person that you're helping take care of.
Yes. You know, we kind of look at it sometimes and go, why? You know, why are you taking them? You know, what's in their soul contract that they have to leave now, or they have to go through so much pain and suffering? And sometimes it is not only the journey that they're taking through it and their own discoveries, but the gift that they leave behind with the people that are paying attention. Right? How many people go through cancer, they're alone or they're just going through treatment and people don't really want to converse with them or do much because they don't know what to say. You know, it's a sensitive subject. But when you've got somebody that's going through something and somebody's there helping you go through it, but at the same time, the little revelations or the stories that come into your mind while you're going through it then are shared. And it's passing on those wonderful views on life, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the stories that my dad shared with me, which they were priceless
Mm.
because as he knew his time was coming to a close, he's like, I can tell you all this stuff now. And
Yeah,
it's like, and I don't have to worry about consequences. And I said, well, then let's hear it, Dad. But it was I mean, we were always close growing up, but, married, moved out, started a career. So, there is a gulf there, but that came back rapidly. Doesn't mean we always got along
hmm,
because you have to set the guidelines for the person you're taking care of, but you don't treat them any different. You don't go around with a pity attitude. You
right.
go around with, we are going to enjoy each day that we have because we don't know when that last day is going to come. And it was amazing. I remember asking him one day, of all the girls I dated and the one I was married to, who was his favorite? And he didn't hesitate. He said, Debbie. And I said, are you kidding me? He says, oh no, I really liked her. And that's the girl who I wrote the book about.
Right.
But that really surprised me. It's like, I never knew. And he goes, well, you do now, don't you? But it was just listening to his stories of the depression, being raised in the restaurant business, which was horrible for him because he had horrible acne. I mean, he did X-ray surgery, not surgery, but X-ray treatment back in the 30s and 40s, and but and that's why he went to college so that he didn't have to do what his parents did.
Hmm.
And it was just interesting to listen to him talk. And it was the same with Debbie, as we did a lot of reminiscing from the things that went right and wrong from high school to when we saw each other in college. But we focused on each other, and that was the real thing that I learned. My partner, there wasn't much I could do with, because when Larry's cancer grabbed hold of him, he was one of those that you just see wither away.
Yeah.
I mean, he worked as long as he could, and he told me, Jeff, the day I can't work is I'll tell you. And I remember we were working just north of downtown Dallas, and he stood up from setting forms. He says, I can't do this anymore. And I said, that's fine. I'll pay you until the very end. And boy, when it hit him, he went down hard. With Debbie and my dad, it was more of, it wasn't drawn out. When it finally hit them, they were Debbie went into the hospital. She was there 3 days before she passed, and my dad was like 5 days because he collapsed after watching an Oklahoma State basketball game, and he just got up and fell over, and I ran over. When I looked in his eyes, the sparkle was gone.
Yeah.
You could tell, okay, we're getting real close. So I called the hospice nurse, and she said 3 to 5 days.
Hmm.
So, but we took advantage of every day. And, being a caretaker, it's not the easiest thing
Hmm.
because your patience is really going to be taxed. But that's where I grew a lot in patience and understanding, compassion, because Debbie had two teenage girls. Now they're going through this.
Yeah.
And they actually told me later that if you would not have shown up in our lives when you did, we don't know what we'd have done, because we're divorced. Dad lives in Oklahoma City. Her doesn't have a great relationship with her parents, and we were kind of on our own. And I said, well, your mom said we got together at the right time for unfinished business.
Hmm. Hmm. Did you
And
ever see the show or the movie or read the book Tuesdays with Maury?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, you would like it.
What's the name of it?
Tuesdays with Maury. It's with Jack Lemmon, one of his last ones. And it's about a guy that Maury,
Jack Lemmon?
yeah, yeah, goes back away. Um, and it's about a guy that is dying. And this young guy goes, he's kind of interviewing him, and he goes every Tuesday. And it's like the lessons learned. And what the guy wanted to do, Maury, is that he wanted to kind of document his death, his what would he learn about his life through the dying. Um, you know, how would he feel as he's leaving this world? And he wanted it documented. And so this is what was done. And it's a beautiful book and a really wonderful movie with Jack Lemmon. And but it sounds very much kind of like what you've done with you know with your girlfriend and with your father. It's a documentation of their life through their dying. And it's a kind of a beautiful way to go out, having somebody that's paying attention to what is their revelation of life as they know they're dying.
I will definitely look that up because I really like Jack Lemmon.
Yes, yeah,
So yes, I
yeah.
will
And
do, and
because it's an older one, obviously, so I think it might be a 90s movie, but it very much reminisces to what you're
yeah, but
doing
the
then.
older ones, the old
Yeah,
the old ones are the best ones.
yes. So, I mean, but it does bring
I don't
that,
care what these kids say
yeah,
today.
exactly. But it does kind of draw that same attention is the allowing the person as they're dying to not only go through the process of their dying, knowing they're leaving the world, but what becomes important to them in their memory as they're going, their reflection on life, and having someone to share that reflection with. It's actually a beautiful gift in the dying process.
It is. I mean, I wouldn't. I w losing them obviously is very difficult, but I would not trade that experience for anything.
Mm,
Because and now with Debbie, so what made her difference is okay, so I've gone through it with my partner and I've gone through it with my dad. Well, we're men.
yeah.
No big deal. Well, now I'm dealing with a woman, and she told me before we got back together that I've finished chemo, I'm on the tail end of radiation, I'm bald, I'm divorced, every reason for me not to come up. And I said, "Are you done talking?"
Hmm.
She goes, "Yes." And I said, "Here's the question. Do you want me to come see you or not? Yes or no?" And she said, "Well, yes." I said, "Okay, then what are we discussing?" But I didn't realize the effect of breast cancer until, for a better term, we consummated the deal because we dated. And I told her, sex is not important. What's important to me is spending time with you and your girls. That's all I care about. Anything else is just going to be the icing on the cake. And the night that it happened, in fact, it's a chapter I have, Please Leave the Light On. When we went to her room and I asked her, "Do you want me to turn the light off?" She said no. And it hit me like a brick. It's like, because she'd had a mastectomy. She goes, she wants to see my
Yeah,
reaction
reaction. Yeah.
to what her chest looks like, cancer here, than I did with my father and my partner. But I just looked at her and I looked in her eyes and I said, "Debbie, that's not what I'm in love with.
Mm,
I'm in love with what's behind your eyes. Your physical attributes, yes, you are an attractive woman, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for what's in your eyes." And I had heard stories after I released the book from especially women that their partner couldn't handle it. And I said, "Well, then you were with the wrong person.
yeah.
I
Exactly.
understand that it's psychologically devastating to a woman, kind of like what you see in that movie, Aaron Brovich,
Hmm.
where the gal's losing her breast and her uterus because she's all eaten up with cancer." And I said, it said, "Then you're with the wrong person. They weren't in love with you for you. They were in love with your physical attributes. And then when you lost one, they were like, well, I can't deal with this. Well, then you found out a lot about your partner.
Mm,
That's that's the way I look at it. And it's yeah, why did you fall in love with that person in the first place? Was it for the
yes.
right reasons or the wrong reasons?
Hmm. And we are so much more than our anatomy.
You are. Yes. Because I've seen some very attractive women, but if a thought went into their brain, it'd scare the hell out of them.
Yes. Yes. Rely purely on the looks.
It's like, and that's what I told my, yeah, it's what I told my boys. And these 20 and 30-year-olds would come up and say, well, what do you look for in a woman? And I said, what's between her brains?
Mm,
Yeah, you might be physically attracted, but get them to start talking.
mm-hmm.
And that's what you're going to find out real quick. And if they can't put two words together, son, head for the hills and head fast
Yes.
because you are setting yourself up for a disaster.
Yeah.
And they're
Because you,
like, really? And I said, go ahead,
no,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I'm done.
The whole thing about that is that um we get attracted to the exterior, and it's the chemistry and everything else. But that only lasts so long in a relationship anyway. And the everyday living comes into place. And you want to know that you can actually sit in silence with someone in the same room and feel like you're having a conversation. You want to know that you can converse about anything, then even if they don't know and it's out of their realm, they're at least interested in knowing more. Because that's what really transcends the test of time, is that ability to communicate with one another. Because the prettiness may go, the sexual passion isn't the same as you get older. So what is left? And you want to have someone where you really feel a connection, that you can talk without speaking and hear each other. And that really, I think, is a true loving connection.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's what Debbie and I had. We didn't have to talk. I mean, and we didn't have to go to nice places all the time. I remember the first time I asked her, I said, "Do you want to go to lunch?" And she goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, where?" She goes, "I want to go to Sonic." You want to go to Sonic, huh? Okay. What do you want? I just want some chili cheese tots. Okay, let's go. And it was the little things
Mm,
that really, for me, it's the little things that make the relationship because it's like you said, just sitting there with when the girls weren't around and just, watching a movie or just anything. We didn't have to talk to communicate.
right. And they're obviously going through the worst time of their life because they know they're fighting, between life and death. Are they going to live? Are they slowly dying? And of course, with her leaving her young girls behind, there had to be a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety around that. And as a caretaker, you've got to navigate all those emotions that are very valid. At the same time, try and keep them optimistic.
Well, now I'll say this much. When Debbie told me she felt cancer had returned in March or April, and they scheduled the MRI, I said, I will be up here for that. So I took her, she got it done, and it's going to take a week for the get the results. And I said, I will be back for that. And we got the diagnosis, and it was a death sentence. It's like, good Lord, she is not going to get through the first round of treatments. But when we went home, her oldest daughter came out, and Debbie walked into the house, and Jessica looked at me and goes, what'd the doctor say? And I said, okay, you have two options. Do you want me to lie to you or do you want the truth? And she goes, I am tired of people lying to
Yeah.
me. I want the truth. And I said, okay, barring a miracle, your mom's going to die. Okay, this is how bad it is. And she just kind of stared at me. She was, I think, 14. And she said, okay, now I know what to get ready for.
Hmm.
I said, "Do you want me to tell your sister?" She said, "No." She said, "No, I'll tell her." Whereas her parents were in denial
Yeah.
up until her last 7 days. And I really got into it with them. I said, if you don't get her to MD Anderson, she's going to die. And they told me, well, her doctor has all these degrees. And I said, I understand I don't have any medical authority here, but you're not listening to me. And they didn't listen until she went into the hospital for the last time. And he's like, well, maybe I should call MD Anderson. And the doctor came walking out. And I said, hey, doctor, would you tell him what you just told me? And he didn't. Her dad just looked at me like, we didn't know. And I said, where the hell have you been?
Yeah.
I don't understand this. But her girls, that's the one thing I learned was, okay, I can't lie to them. I'm going to tell them the truth, but we're not going to treat your mom any different.
Hmm.
We will have her active in everything that she can physically do until the day she says, I can't do this anymore. But we're not going to go around with sad
Pussyfooting around.
faces and have
Hmm.
a, yeah, no, we're
Hmm.
not. We're going to deal with it and address it as best we can.
I mean, this show is called Your Health is Your Choice. And then, when we're handed that death sentence, whatever it may be, it's still our choice on how we go out and what quality of
It
life we
is.
have before we go out. And it's not just our health then, it's the health of the people around us, the well-beingness, that they're not left in shock or in remorse or, in fear that we as people knowing that this might be our last weeks or months, how I conduct myself through this process is the ease in which they're going to accept my death and the well-beingness that is going to be left with them. It's very important.
It is. My dad was a stinker up until the end. I mean, he had his routine, and by God, Jeffrey, you are not going to interrupt it. I'm going to watch my shows. In fact, he was a big Matlock Murder She Wrote, and when I was talking about stories after Murder She Wrote, Charlie's Angels came on, and I looked at him and I said, "Explain Charlie's Angels, Dad." And he goes, "It's the plot, son. It's the plot, but don't tell your mom." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay." Now it's he looked at his watch and he goes, "I'm ready for my ice cream. Go get me some ice cream. Charlie's Angels is coming on." And I said, "Not a problem." But yeah, he stayed rigid with his routine, did as much as he could. But yeah, he wasn't going to miss his favorite shows either. And
Right.
that was kind of fun to watch.
It is accepting. I mean, nobody's promised today or tomorrow. We don't know,
Nope.
right? Anything can happen. And
Correct.
the thing is that being present, being present with self in the now is what we say to people all the time. Be present. It's
Mm-hmm.
exceptionally important. So that being present with self is the way he decided to go out. I am going to be present in every moment and what I enjoy because I don't know how long I have. And so I'm going to just relish in the moment.
Yes, and he did. He was, and we could sit on the back porch and not say a word, but he did do something one night that, let's just say that, Debbie and I were in high school and I had an accident, and I won't go into what caused the accident, but I did back into a guy. I know I looked both ways. To this day, I swear I looked both ways. I backed into this guy, and my best friend, I went over to his house one day, and his father asked me, "Did you back into this guy?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" "No, no, no." Well, 30 years later, sitting out there with my dad, he just looked up and stared at me and goes, "Hey, Jeff, you remember that wreck you had at Wendy's?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" Yeah, I knew all about it because he was good friends with Bill Paling. And Bill had called him up and said, "Ralph, I need to tell you what your son did this week." And I was like, "You've known all these years and never said a word." And he goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, hell, Dad. Oh, hell." But, all I could do is shake my head and go, "You've been waiting how many years to tell me that?" And he goes, just to get you when at the right moment. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done, Dad. But
It's little nuggets,
yeah, like I
isn't it?
said,
It's
though,
little things.
it was.
Mhm.
It's the ones that just hit you up the side of the head and you go, you've known that for how many decades?
Yeah.
Well, I was just waiting for the right moment.
And he could have used it as a punishment at
I
any
mean,
time. But I think it's a
oh, at
reminder
any
to us.
time.
Yeah, exactly. And he chose not to, which is good on him. But yeah, I think, what it is a reminder of to all of us is how precious time is. We become very complacent with life and very disgruntled. Instead of being grateful for what we do have, we're always focusing on what we don't have. And then when time is given to us and saying, you haven't got much time left, then it's the choice of what do I live in? Do I live in bitterness? My father was given a death sentence, not for cancer, but for heart disease. Instead of them saying, change your lifestyle, change the way you eat, change your anxiety, change this and that, and you can have a longer lifespan. He instead, as a Spitfire pilot in the war, kind of took it on as the enemy. And he drank more and he did everything more, right? And he just carried on as if, and he was a racing car driver, and he carried on as if everything was the last moment and the death of everything, right? So for him, it was, come on, death, come and get me. And he died 4 years later. He didn't live 3 months, 4 months, as they said. He died 4 years later, and he could have lived a lot longer. But he was a bugger, an absolute bugger, because it was like, come on, life, you're going to take it, became bitter and twisted and it drank more. And it was really difficult for the family. And I think choosing to go with grace, choosing to go, okay, I don't know if I've got a month or 2 months or 3 months. I'm going to embrace every day as a gift. I'm going to look at every day as something important. Then I think that whatever time you've got, you're truly living, but you're also not imposing on other people any regret or bitterness because it doesn't serve the family well or doesn't serve anybody well to do that.
Right. But he was involved in the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, he was a squadron leader, a fighter pilot in the war, Second World War. And so he did a lot of stealth stuff, a lot of getting spies out, protecting the bombers. So yes, he was, don't know if he was in the Battle of Britain, but because he wouldn't
Well, that
talk
would have
about
been
it. Mhm.
right. Well, that'd have been 1940. When was he commissioned in the RAF?
Actually, he was in the Navy because they wouldn't accept him. And then after, I think it was the Battle of Britain where they realized they needed pilots. And he learned to fly in 17
Yes.
hours and he was up there. So I think it was after the Battle of Britain. And
Okay.
so, yeah, he's, would fly in with his tail on fire. At the end of it, there was only two of his squadron left and they both died early. So he was the last of them. He was 45.
Okay. It's amazing what that generation went through to
Yeah.
keep the world free, and they sure saw a lot of bad stuff.
Yes. And they had to
But
keep it in Britain, suck it up, stiff upper lip, old man. And they didn't go through any downloading, post-traumatic stress. And I think that's what played havoc on his
right.
heart, and we didn't honor any of that. We're just like the war is over now, suck it up, get on with it, and without dealing with what they had
Yes.
been through. And we've learned now. I'm going to look at our veterans now. I have a veteran show, and they admit to the post-traumatic stress, and they admit to how it changed their life, and they themselves have created programs that help other veterans because they know what's needed because they've been left behind. And so we're still doing it. We ask people to fight for their country and then discard them afterwards. And, oh, thank you for your service, but I'm not there for you now. And so we see way too many people leave too soon because they just can't deal with the life in where the world they're in now. So if people have got that chance to have someone love them and care for them and be for them as they exit life, that is such a gift to them and to the people they leave behind because you've had that transition of being able to let go. So when death does come, it's more acceptable. But for so many people, they don't get that. So you've had a gift with all of them in that you've given
Yes,
them that grace of exit.
and I'm glad some of that the stiff upper lip changed because
Mm.
in the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, a whole lot of these veterans, whether they were male, female, whatever country they came from, even the Holocaust survivors,
Mhm.
have been writing books about it because they're finally able to release it.
Yes.
Realize,
Yes.
okay, it's been long enough, just like the show Band of Brothers. Winters
Brilliant show.
finally got, Ambrose took it upon himself to go interview all of these people
Hmm.
that had served in the paratroops. And 20 years prior, they wouldn't have told their story because I don't want to relive that. But then they
Yeah.
realize we really need to unburden ourselves. And this man or woman is willing to accept that burden and do our memory and our
Yeah.
generation an honor. And
Yeah.
it has been, I have read, I don't know how many books on that, and it's just amazing because they all admit, in fact, just recently, a gentleman by the name of Woody Williams uh, passed away, Herschel Woody Williams, at 100 years old. He was on Iwo Jima. And he talked about when he came back, he was smoking like 4 or 5 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking excessively, and it took him 15 years before he walked into a church again.
Mm,
And he said he wanted nothing to do with it, but his girls were dressed up in their white April Easter dresses, and so he finally decided he was going to go. But he sat at the very edge of the pew,
you.
and his wife was like, "Oh, he's going to bolt."
Yes.
And he did. He stood up halfway in the service, but he didn't bolt. He walked down because he realized the pain and suffering he'd been carrying for 15 years. He received the Medal of Honor, but he didn't remember anything he did until he read the after action report. He just knew that he could not rest anymore. And he
Yeah.
went down to the minister and he goes, "May I help you?" And he goes, "I need to be saved, and I need to be saved right now." And the minister said, "Then we'll stop the sermon and we're going to save this man." And he
Hmm.
goes, "My whole life turned around because I was finally releasing that burden." And I look at that the same way with cancer
Yes.
is they're releasing their burden
Hmm.
on us. Now, are we going to be strong enough
Hmm.
to deal with it? Because we can do two things. We can embrace it and do the best we can, or we can run away.
Yeah. And it's not going to be easy. There's going to be the times when the
No.
anger and the pain and the frustration and the fear are going to step in. And it's, how do you handle it at that time? How are you equipped to handle it? Do you know, or is it just by gut instincts? All you can be is, sometimes take the abuse and know that it's not directed at you, it's directed at what they're going through, and just be there for them. But then I've done shows on who takes care of the caregivers.
That's a good question because all I could do was write.
Mm,
That's the way I took care. That's the only way I could shed the burden per se is let me put it in words. And that helped with the healing because even though I'm remembering all of the bad things, I'm also remembering a whole lot of the good.
yeah,
And that will outweigh the bad. So when you've done writing it out, it's like, it was difficult, but you answered the call and everyone is much better off and they're in a better place because they're no longer in pain.
exactly. That's the thing. It's also to actually understand, we're spiritual beings having a human existence. And that sometimes that human existence has a great deal of struggle and sometimes it has suffering. I think suffering is a choice, whether we can suffer through it or struggle through it. I think there is a difference there. Suffering is when you feel so hopeless and helpless that you can't do anything. Struggle is that I will meet the challenge and ride it to see where it's going to take me or try and rise above it, whatever the case is. And I think that understanding that when we don't know when we're going to go and it just happens, that it's just happened. you know, we've crossed over. But when we know we're going to go, and especially if you're leaving kids behind, it's that preparation of knowing you're going, that resentment of the fact that you're not going to see them grow up. You know, are they going to be okay without me? What do I need to leave behind for them? There's so much that a person has to go through that all we need to do is ride the wave with them and help them the best we can in providing what they need to leave behind so they feel secure enough to go, but also understanding the tears of them knowing they're not going to see the things that they want to see. And I think that is understandable. But with the caregivers, you know, you get caregivers that are burnt out. You got caregivers that are going through their own stress because they're absorbing the other person's stress. So how do the
Yes.
caregivers release? How do you release when you're going through that? You wrote about it, but at the same time, was there anything else that you did that helped
I
you?
compartmental I
Mm,
compartmentalized everything because being in road construction, which I was for all those years, one of the things I loved the most was setting up a schedule, putting a plan together, and then initiating that plan.
mhm.
Now, I know that a lot of people can't do that, but each time I heard, okay, this person has cancer, it was like, so what's going to be our plan of action?
Mhm.
Well, what will my plan of action be, and how will I coordinate that with the patient per se?
Yes.
With Debbie, it was very difficult at times because I'm 2.5 hours away.
Mm,
So I couldn't be there 7 days a week until the last, let's say 2, maybe 3 weeks when I knew it was coming, but I still had to take care of responsibilities, but she was the priority. So let's put the best plan we can and move forward. And it wasn't easy, but for me, it was logical. And I didn't focus on what I couldn't control,
yeah.
only on what I could control.
Right.
So that way I couldn't be blindsided by anything. I remember when I was talking to her doctors, I saw the same look in their eyes as I did with my dad's. And it's like, okay, I now know the deal.
Hmm.
I know that this is terminal, even though they won't use that word.
Hmm.
So, uh, you know, a battle plan, just
Yeah.
I put something logical together that, okay, this has got to work for everybody. But the one thing I cannot do, which I did learn from my dad, is you cannot go 24/7 because if you
Yeah.
do, you're going to fall apart. And
Yeah.
if you fall apart, then everyone else around you is going to fall apart. And now we're going to have a disaster. So, as a caretaker, you've got to get your rest and you've got to get out. You've got to get out of the house, the apartment, whatever that person lives, and you've got to entertain yourself. I don't care if it's just getting something to eat, if it's going to the park and having a walk, but you have to distance yourself at least once a week so that you can recharge and clear your mind and relax. Otherwise, it becomes a horrible burden to where you can't function.
Yeah. And then you become the patient.
Yes. And who's
Yes.
going to take care of you?
I've
No
got
one.
photographs of me with my children, like, you know, they'll come down with tonsillitis. And so I have a picture of them all pale and I'm holding them. And then a picture 3 days or 4 days later, they're fine jumping around and I'm the pale one.
Yes. And you're like, this is horrible. What happened?
Exactly. And you know that's short and temporary and you'll get over it. A couple of nights sleep and you'll get back on track again. But when it's something terminal, you don't know when that time is going to come. And you're in preparation for it all the time. And wanting to know that you're there at the actual moment when they cross over so that they're peaceful. My brother and sister were my mother's caretaker, and at the end, I think she had stomach cancer, but no doctor would go and see her. She only had nurses, and she was bedbound, so she couldn't go to them. And you know, my brother was the main caretaker. He showered her, he looked after her, he did everything, which actually ended up having a heart attack in doing it because juggling a job, looking after her, and the stress of it. Apparently, he had a heart defect like my father that we didn't know about. And so when my sister was there, she got a hernia from lifting my mother up, and you know, a whole load of stuff went on with them looking after her. But when it came to her crossing over, she needed to die. She was 95 in excruciating pain. Um, she was on morphine. And I remember putting out a prayer vigil on Facebook to all my friends and followers and saying, my mom needs to cross over and she just can't let go or it's not happening. She needs help in the crossing over. And I had 130 people send out prayers, not just likes, but prayers. The next
Yes.
day, my brother said goodbye to my mum and he was going away for a respite, and my sister was going to look after my mum. And they had converted the living room for her, so she was on the main floor. And it was a beautiful bay window, but apparently it was a rainy day. And my sister said, I'm just going to go make a cup of tea. And when she came back in, the sunlight was streaming through the window. It was streaming directly on my mum, and my mum's eyes and hands were open, and she had crossed over peacefully. And this was all within 24 hours of that prayer vigil, which I 100% believe, whether it's God or whatever you believe in, but that coming together of that energy and how it can be beneficial. And she crossed over peacefully. But I think that that's what we want to see when somebody is in so much pain, when they're reach that end of life where it's just now too excruciating. What you want is a release for them to be able to let go and ascend to their next journey of life, which is without this body. Let the spirit fly, let the soul be released. And I think that is a release. And I didn't cry when my dad died. I didn't cry when my mum died. I'm one of those people that I don't cry for them. They've gone home. They're fine. It's my loss, and the tears come out in different ways. Um, and I think that's if you look at death as something inevitable, and if we can make it as peaceful and as beautiful as possible, um, and be there for them, where they know they're loved and they're supported right to the end, when that end comes, it's something that's not only released to you that the final day has come, but it's also knowing that they're now released from what they're struggling with and that they've gone home. And I think that a lot of people will look at death and they are so devastated by the loss, which yes, there is a loss, but I think it's also understanding the beauty of letting them go. And that is something that's really, really important. How was it for you at that end in the letting go?
Well, I watched that with Debbie, and you could see as you talked about your mom, you could tell she was leaving because all that pain on
Mm.
her face was subsiding.
Mm-hmm.
And she was finally smiling. And that was probably the hardest thing when we got back together was to get her to smile again
Mm-hmm.
because she looked at everything that had been bad in her life. And I'm like, well, let's look at what's good in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her daughters actually saying one time, Mom's laughing and she's smiling. And I said, well, she damn well better be. She's got an idiot for a boyfriend right now. And they're like, yeah, that'll do it, won't it? I said, yes. I'm trying to bring that high school girl out of her, out of that adult woman who thinks life has really dealt her some bad hands. But hey, you know, it's life. We deal with it. Now, do you want to worry about it and complain about it, or do you just want to go forward and have some fun like we did 30 plus years ago?
Yeah.
And she finally realized, well, I guess if it doesn't bother you, it shouldn't bother me. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, there you go. I mean, I actually put one of her wigs on one day and she was just like, take that off. I said, but it looks better on me. She didn't appreciate that, but it was like, well,
But
so
whatever it does to lift up the spirit, right, to make that transition. But ultimately, at the end, you do want to let them go because you do know that you're releasing them from the pain and the anguish. And then the next chapter is
Yes.
is in being left behind, um, but realizing the gift that they have left you. They've left. You couldn't do anything about that. But what was the
Nope.
gift that they left you with?
The gift that, well, all three of them left me was the fond memories,
Mm,
the good times, uh, and occasionally remembering some of the bad ones. But it was just with Debbie especially, I didn't realize how deep I could love someone
hmm
until we got back together. Even being married, I did not love my wife like I did Debbie, not even close, because I got married for the wrong reasons.
hmm
I was with Debbie for the right reasons.
hmm
The same with my father. We always had a good relationship, but I found out just how much we had in common and how much we loved each other. My partner, that was more of just a friendship deal. We had worked together, so it was a professional relationship, but it was still hard. But I mean, to this day, there isn't a week that goes by that I don't have a memory from my father or Debbie that'll make me smile
Yeah.
and go, yeah, those were good times. Those were fun times.
Those
And
are the memories that you hold on to, right? You don't remember I mean, you can talk about the stuff that happened, but it's releasing the pain to do with that memory, right? It's remembering, it's choosing to remember the joyful times, the times that made you laugh, the
absolutely.
times that make you smile, because that's the gift of each other, is being able to smile at those moments that you had together.
I mean, yes, they're gone, but they are not forgotten. I mean, and sadly, uh, I just lost my editor that I had known for 30 years.
Mhm.
And that you talk about getting hit up the side of the head with a brick. Her husband sends me a message that she's in hospice care. And I go, well, what the hell are you talking about? Well, she'd been fighting liver disease for 3 years. I wasn't aware of that. And I didn't release the book because I needed to do a dedication for her until I got the word from him. And boy, that was that was just as bad as losing Debbie, because here's a gal I've known for 20 plus years. And even though we go for different colleges and stuff, we had a really good relationship. Well, now I'm able to help her husband go through this process since I've been there,
hmm
and just, send him a message once or twice a week. And he finally got with me to, he tells me how he's doing, that it's just like one step at a time each day. I said, yes, it is. So just do what you can. Don't overwhelm yourself. And then I heard from him the other night and he goes, I want 8 copies of the last book that she worked on for you. And I said, it's a done deal, man.
hmm
But but we were able to start talking about the good memories
Yeah.
of Genevieve and the fun things. And I mean, he's an Oklahoma State fan. I am too. She was an OU fan, which are two colleges. No, the mood and the sadness by making fun of his wife
hmm
now that she's gone, because she can't beat us or bite our kneecaps off.
Yes.
So
I mean,
even though it's a
ultimately,
serious situation,
yeah,
go ahead.
but ultimately that's it, isn't it? Is that we don't know when our time is going to come up. And what we want to know is that the legacy that we've left behind is a smile, is a laugh, is a good
Yes.
memory, is a good feeling. You know, that we counted in someone's life, right? That, somebody was sad to see us go because of what contribution we gave to their lives. And I think that's something that we all look for. We don't want to be forgotten. We don't want to be kind of just dismissed
No,
because they've gone, oh, because it's too painful to remember. No, even through the pain, remember the good times because that's how you heal the pain.
it is. In fact, the book that she worked on was about a good friend of mine who passed from liver cancer in 2021 during Christmas. And he was, I don't know if y'all had the commercial, The Most Interesting Man in the World. it was a Dos Equis commercial. Well, this guy was, just real quick, born in Beirut, raised in Armenia, served in the Russian army during the Cold War, and defected and came to the United States and became the top dealer, carpet dealer, moved to Dallas, was a big socialite. When the oil bust hit, he became the largest importer of Russian arms in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And since he was dealing with Moscow, he became a liaison with the FBI and the CIA with his contacts in Moscow. I mean, he went to Star City. This guy he did it all.
Mm.
He had it all. And he had told me, I need you to tell my story. But he never sat down and told it all. So it's a work of fiction, but it's based off how do I characterize this man and honor his legacy and his life, but staying in true form with who he actually was.
Mm-hmm.
So here I've got an editor's past. I have a good friend, and yeah, he and I would argue all the time, but once again, I became his caregiver for a very short period of time because when he went to I remember he came to my room and it's like, you need to go to the hospital. You need to go right now. We're not doing messing around because he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer in the summer and he went through that and they got it. But either they didn't tell him or he didn't understand it had moved into his liver.
Mm.
And that was sad because I mean, he went in on like December 23rd and he was gone on the 29th, but his family was in California and France. And I became their
Liaison.
medium
Mm-hmm.
on setting everything up and going through all of his belongings. That was tough, especially when I got into his photo album. But his photos went back they had to have gone back to the beginning of the 20th century from his parents when they were children. It was the most phenomenal album I've seen, but it was so cool because now I get to go through and actually look at his whole life, his parents' lives, him as a child, and just go, this is a wonderful heirloom.
Yeah.
These are the
Yeah.
stories he didn't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my healing, was cleaning up the room's another story, but going through that photo album and seeing all of his relatives is like, now this is really a gift. That yes, all of that was shipped to his family in California, but once again, I'm honoring him through words.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
he was a true life James Bond. Ian
Mm-hmm.
Fleming would have loved to have met this guy.
And you know who he might have been inspired by, Ian Fleming and James Bond. We never
I
know, right, where the
I
inspiration is going to be. So,
I
that's
yeah, you don't.
and that's again,
He
you
was
honor
he
people with the
was
words.
he just because he was a guy that husbands and boyfriends didn't want him around their women. I'll tell you that right now, because he had that Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable pers persona, and when you saw him, he looked like a Italian mob boss because that's the way he dressed too. He was always dressed to the nines, and it's like, good Lord, but oh, the stories. So now I'm getting to relive his life and his character in this fictional work based on fact. He was also an actor. He had a SAG card in the United States.
So it's faction, right? It's
It's
faction.
faction. I like that. It's
Mm.
faction. Yeah.
Hmm. Taking some fact and fictionalizing it, right?
Yeah.
And honoring a story that way, and obviously doing as much research as you can and talking to as many people as you can about him. But just, very often when we see people larger than life, we don't think about them when they were young. What took them on that path? What was that catalyst that set them on the road that they're on now? And it's always intriguing of, why do we choose what we choose? And if there's a way of bringing that about, because obviously he had an extraordinary life and one that we probably wouldn't believe today. Couldn't probably get away with today with social media and everything else, because that makes it much, much harder to do the type of thing he did. There's nowhere to
But
hide
the one thing,
nowadays.
the one thing he never told us was how he defected
Mm,
from the Soviet Union. Because what was even when he started selling arms, the Soviet Union hadn't collapsed.
right,
And it's like, no, wait a minute. You are a defector and you're going back to the Kremlin. And he goes, I knew the right people.
right. Yes.
Well, who were those people? Well, those are the people that he didn't name. He said, I can't tell you everything because some of them are still alive.
Yeah.
And
And
there
they
could
wouldn't be
be
for long. You're right.
yeah, there could be consequences. So, as you said, it's a work of faction.
Yes. Taking the fact this did happen and fictionalizing the people
Yes.
for their own
You,
protection. Yeah.
yes, you have coined a new word today.
When have people before? But the
I
whole
like
thing is
that.
is living honoring someone's life, with the impact he's had on
Yes,
you, but also in this case of taking somebody's fact of life, fictionalizing it in, because quite honestly, his life was larger than fact anyway.
it
I mean, he
was.
was
It
kind of
was
living a
ridiculous.
fictional life, so it's not so far stretched, right? To
Yeah,
to bring that
it
in.
was I mean, it's turned into three books because there was so much to his life.
Mm.
And it's like, Bears, quit talking to me. I've got to finish this one before I do the next one. But yeah, your head just goes, you knew who? You
Right.
did what?
What?
You were making how much money?
Yeah.
And what wife did you abscond from the husband? Would you excuse me? Did you really do that? And he just smiled and go, I did. And it's like, what is wrong with you? He goes, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, to bring
What a
that character alive and all those things that you know about him, and then, of course, fictionalizing the names and places. But it is, again, the things that we buy in fiction the most are things that are based in possible fact.
yes. And that's what this is. And it's just I've never written a book as fast as I did his first one. I I think 7 weeks, 8 weeks, it was done. And it's like Debbie's book didn't go that fast. None of the others did, but this one, it's like, is he standing over my shoulder going, yes, 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 that's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I
And
want.
probably is.
Because
And
this
probably is. Yes.
because the second one is 75% complete.
Mm,
And it's just flying. Well, I've had a medical issue. That's another story, but it's been flying along going, the more I write, the more I get to see who this man was.
yeah.
I mean, he was friends with Ken Kercheval, uh, Larry Hagman, the Stars of Dallas.
Yes, I remember him. Yeah.
I mean, you name it, Victoria Principal, Ben
Hmm.
Gazzara. He couldn't stand Warren Beatty. He did not have a good story about Warren, but because they were both up for a part in the movie, and the story was Warren told the producers he didn't want him in the movie because he was better looking than him. And that did not make Bears a happy man. I mean, even
Yeah.
when he told the story, he was very, being kind of Middle Eastern, very emotional, and used his hands all the time and
Yes.
would just, he just get excited. It's like, Bears, settle down. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. But yeah, get into, I mean, and I guess that's what I love about writing is honoring these people, because this
Mm,
book I get to honor too, him
mm.
and my editor.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, trying to find a new editor, one that kind of got you the way your other one did. It's hard. It's hard to replace somebody that
It's,
kind of gets.
it is, yeah, it's the hardest thing. It's like finding a real good mate. You
Mm,
you got to look hard, and you really got to not research them, but as I said earlier, what's between your ears? Because I'm going to give you a couple of paragraphs, and let's see what you don't like about it. And that's when people go, well, how do you pick an editor? I said, that's how I do it. I'll give them some paragraphs and say, edit it. Let's see what you got.
yeah, yeah,
So what's between your ears is very important. And if they're not willing, if you're not willing to be criticized, and that's what a good editor for me does. They tell me this is really bad. You need to rewrite this. Okay, I need to do that because I remember when I first got into this, I got a 1 star and a 2 star, and kind of like getting these cancer diagnosis, you can either sink or swim. Well, I took those reviews to heart, and I saw a common thread, and I went back to this first novel that I wrote, and they were right. It was bad. It needed enema, and it'd been through two, but I found out what to start looking for.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I went through and wiped out something like 15,000 words and said, that's a better story. That's a lot tighter. So I took some bad reviews, kind of like
Hmm.
a bad diagnosis, and like, all right, let's learn from this, put a plan together and make the best of it.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're here to do is learning with, Larry, Dad, and Debbie, and then Bears and Genevieve with each disease and diagnosis. I learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about them.
Yeah. Although we put this under our health as a choice, I think their story matters probably would have been a better genre. But, when it comes back down to it, is people look at health as just being a physical thing, but they don't understand it's a spiritual thing. It's an essence thing. It's a well-beingness thing. And it's like, when you're watching somebody leave this world, and they cannot fight for their life anymore because it's the battle is done. It is about your well-beingness, what they leave you. We don't take care of our psyche as we should. We think everything medical is just to do with the human body, and we don't realize it's not just the mind, but it's the psyche of who we are and what we're left with, and how that has an impact on our own well-beingness. And so, our health is in when we're looking after people that are leaving, but how we're looking after ourselves, mind, body, heart, spirit, and soul, the whole of us, because that's really
Yes.
important. Otherwise, we kind of go with them in many ways. And that's not what it's about. This is the end of their journey, and it's what they've left behind with you that you carry forward. But we don't want to get so immersed into the losing of them that we lose ourselves as well.
Yes. In fact, when you were talking about your mom and the sunlight coming in,
Hmm.
it reminded me of my niece came in. And this is one thing when you're taking care of someone, listen to them
Yes.
because they're not imagining things. And my niece came in and goes, he won't let me change him. And I said, what seems to be the problem? Well, he says there's people in the room.
Hmm.
Okay. So I walked in there. You could feel them.
Yeah. Yes.
You could
Yeah.
feel these presences
Yeah.
in there. And I
Hmm.
just looked at Dad and said, I have a question. And he goes, what? And I said, I understand that you're having a conversation with a lot of people in here. And he goes, I am. I said, okay, do me a favor. And he goes, what's that? Tell them to give us 5 minutes to clean you up and change you, and we'll be out of your hair and y'all can go back to the conversation. And he just looked up and he goes, folks, give me 5 minutes and I'll be back. And he was dead serious. And of course,
Yes.
my mom, she goes, he's hallucinating. And I said,
Mm-mm.
you didn't feel the presence in that
Yeah.
room?
Hmm.
It was very strong. They're getting ready to
Yes.
bring
Receiving.
Ralph home.
Yeah. Yes.
And when we were done, I said, Dad, go back to your conversation. He said, thank you. And get the hell out of my room. We're gone. We're gone.
Yeah, people
But
don't
was that kind of
understand.
the way it was?
Yeah, I think it's the way it was
Was that
with
the
my
way
mum.
with your mom?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the way it was. I think before she just, she wanted to cross over, but she didn't know how. And then eventually, the presence helped cross her over.
135 prayer partners.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. And this is where I very much believe in the power of energy. We're all energy, everything is energy, and the higher frequency of love, sending out those loving prayers of her to cross over peacefully. And it happened within 24 hours. And it's like, um, don't please do not demean or dismiss what somebody is going through in their last hours or days, because the presence of others there, and if you took a Geico thing that can measure energy, into the room, you would measure that energy in there of
Yes,
the
you would.
presence of yeah, the presence
Absolutely.
of them being there because they're there to help them cross over, to go home. Right, because there's a lot of deaf doulas that I've interviewed, deaf midwives, and they're talking about that veil of time from when a person physically crosses over to when their spirit actually leaves. And this is why we don't want to have people hysterically crying or people immediately stripping the bed or anything else. Allow that time of grace for them to ascend and leave the body and have their spirit leave the body, and sever that tie. And that's just as important, as anything else, that time of transition.
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got your books here. Now, how do people find where to get your books? Because you've got the Love's True Second Trance and you've got the Gateway Pioshi. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes, I believe so. Pioche. Well,
Um,
I've written 23.
you have,
They're all
okay.
on they're all on Amazon. Uh, and they're also listed on Goodreads.
Mm-hmm.
I currently don't have a website, but I mean the ones that we were discussing today, it's like why did everything happen?
Mm-hmm.
Love's True Second Chance, Living with Breast Cancer, and then the one that I just released about the gentleman we're talking about, the name is Bears. And then when we were talking about the war, I have a poetry book dedicated to the women who have served on the front lines and on the home front, which women have not, in my opinion, been
Mm-hmm.
properly
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Acknowledged.
acknowledged. And I saw that in the movie When We Were Soldiers that Mel Gibson was in, when the
Mm-hmm.
women are getting the Western Union telegrams. I mean, I've read 300 books on World War II, and maybe three were about women. It's like, we need to honor them. And that's what I did in Women of War. So, but yes, everyone is, what else? TikTok, Dawson Main, OWM, because I'm an old white man and that's what I call myself.
So
But
all of these books,
Facebook, Jeff Dawson,
and they can all be
go ahead.
found here on Amazon. And of course, is the latest one Love's True Second Chance, or is um
No, I wrote the current one is the name is Bears. Love's
Beth?
True Second Chance. I wrote that in 2011.
Right. So the name is Birch. Is that the one, the latest one?
Yes. The latest one is the name is Berge.
Right.
That's
And
the
you and
gentleman
you've
we were
got
talking about.
and you've got two more books coming out on him.
His life was so big. Yes, it will be 3 books. I hope it's only 3 books. I don't know if I could write a fourth one on him.
And so they can find all the books on Amazon by just putting in your name, Jess,
Yes.
Jeff Dawson, Dawson. But as you said, you're also on Twitter, Jeff Dawson 59, TikTok, Dawson Domain Own, and Facebook Loves True Second Chance. And they can also
Yes.
reach you at jdawson41 at netzero.net email.
Cor yes.
Excellent. So, I mean, keep on writing. Obviously, this is, your forte, whichever way the journey takes you. Um, it
Yes.
seems to also that you're very much talking about people that have crossed over, not so much living
Yes.
now, but people that have crossed over, and that obviously is your niche, because obviously you're channeling them. And what they want you to write and what they want you to say about them. And, I'm glad that you're doing stories on women in the war, which were totally dismissed after the war, even during the war, the contribution. But there's so much, I think, if we look back to the past and see all those that have paved the path for us, whether it be war or what industry or anything else, and show some gratitude for the path that they've laid before us,
Absolutely.
we would revere and respect ourselves and everyone else, no matter what species we are, more today, because we know the past paves the way for the future. But it's amazing how many people in the present don't pay attention to the path that's being paved for them.
What happened to women after the war, whether it was the U.S., the UK, or the USSR, they all did the same thing. When the war was over, it didn't matter what service
Mhm.
that you all provided that country. It's like, all right, you're done, go away.
Yes, exactly. Go back
Excuse
to
me,
your
what? Go
life.
away.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we're done with you. Well, what
yeah,
about benefits? What benefits do you want? You're not
right.
getting any benefits.
Yeah,
But the men did, but
yes,
the women didn't
right. And even
on
some of the
all
men
three of
did it.
those countries.
Yes, I mean in America, I
Yeah.
mean our veterans still are fighting for those benefits, and that's why because I'm anti-war, but I interview the veterans that have now created programs and created organizations that help veterans and help anybody across the board. But it came about
Yes.
through the need that they weren't getting from anyone else. So, yeah,
Yes,
very,
because the
very important.
government, well, we know how governments work.
Yeah, slow and in their own interest.
Poorly.
Poorly,
Yes,
very poorly.
that is correct.
Definitely.
That is correct.
Thank you so much for sharing with us here today. Folks, please go and look at all the books. I mean, got massive amount of them up here. Cold North Sea, No Ordinary Killing, Editing Reality TV, Back Home, so many different subjects. And just,
Okay, excuse me, those ones you just mentioned, that's a different Jeff
oh, is
Dawson.
it? Okay.
No
That's why.
Ordinary Killing, and that's a different Jeff Dawson.
Okay, so you need to have
So
your own show page up there under your name so that they
well,
don't get mixed up.
I've got it, but you have to go down. So I just tell people type in one of my titles, and that takes you to my page. Whether it's Love's True Second Chance, Why did everything happen, Women of War. When you type in a title, that takes you to me because there's like 4 Jeff Dawson.
Okay.
That's it. It happens. It's okay.
Yes, no, I want to make sure that we actually give people one link that actually
Yes.
is going to give the where all of your books are, so that it's easy for people to find. So, having that Amazon page with just you, with all of your books, is good to have because in that way people can find everything that you've got there. So,
Right. Well, I have that, but like I said, there's 3 or 4 Jeff Dawsons the same way. And that's why even when I search myself, I have to type in the title occupation. When
mm,
I do that, there it is. So I click on my name and that takes me to everything.
I'm going
So
to do
that's
that right now and see what happens. Occupation.
okay. Occupation.
Okay, let's see what comes up because I want people to find you. Um, okay, not sure this is you. We're going to find you and we're going to make sure that we've got you here for sure. I want all of your books to be
Okay.
found for people, but that's why it's good to have a website. And then you've got everything there.
I understand. I understand that's in the process.
Good.
It's in
I'm
the
glad to hear it.
process. But
I'm
yeah,
glad to hear it.
you type in Jeff Dawson occupation and you'll see it's it's a World War II book about vampire clans
Ah,
coming together after and it follows World War II, the real history of World War II. And
right. So
these clans lined
occupation,
up.
cauldron, and sabotage.
There you go.
Right.
Bingo.
Right. Okay.
There'll
Yes.
be 3 more in that series.
Okay.
And
Good.
I'm taking that through the end of World War II. So yeah, now you're seeing them all.
Great. Well, thank you so much and keep writing. Obviously, it's your forte, and obviously respecting and bringing basically what you're doing is giving the dead a voice, right? Those that have gone,
Yes.
you're giving them a voice, and maybe that came about through you seeing people transition, but really understanding what death is. It's just the end of our end of our book in life. It doesn't mean it's the end of our spirit that carries on. It's the end
Yep.
of our life as we know it here on earth. But it's what did we leave behind and how did it impact other people? And
And
did it impact them in a positive way to have good memories? And that's really what we want to leave behind.
and that's what I love about the Gateway PH that you mentioned. There's a
Mm.
character, Judith Anderson. Well, I knew her in junior high And sadly, about, what was it, 20 years ago, I got a message that, did you hear about Judy? And I said, no. Her husband killed her and then
Oh
killed
gosh.
himself.
Mm,
And it's like, really? So when I was looking for characters, it's like such a sweet girl and pretty and nice and had a really good brain between her ears. I said, she's going to get honored in this series. And
mhm.
she is going to be one good woman. She's going to be mean too, but you're going to like her.
Mean kindness.
Mean
Well, thank
kind. Yeah, what she's got. Yeah, go ahead.
no, that's okay. That's okay. So if the mean kindness, that's when we find the inner strength. It doesn't mean to be mean, but sometimes you've got to be mean to be kind, right?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing here today. It's as I said, should have put you under so many different other titles that we got here, but ultimately is knowing that take care of yourself when you're being a caretaker of somebody that's passing.
Yes.
Honor their journey, all the reactions that they go through because it's part of the process. And their legacy is in what they leave you and how you share it on. And you share it on through your writing, and not just people that you've personally lost, but people that you feel that should be honored for what they have left behind, because they haven't been. So thank you for what you're writing and keep on writing.
Sarah, it has been my pleasure.
Until next time, folks, there's a lot to learn from people that have gone before. And remember, your health is your choice, and how you look at life, how you look at death, how you look at well-beingness, but also how we honor the people that have gone before us and how we keep them alive in our storytelling. So until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.